I'll start from the end and say this is the proper direction to mount the Falcon 3.3 with the reservoir shocks, the vancompass, on a t1n Sprinter, 140 wheelbase. And I specify the 140 wheelbase because it's not really necessary to install in this direction. I mean, this is the direction that they recommend with the reservoir facing the front for the t1n, but it's only necessary really to do it this way on the 140 wheelbase. On the 158 wheelbase, it can kind of be installed in either direction, and I'll explain why in a second. And I will say that the instructions on vancompass, the t1n sheet page, are very confusing because on the one hand, they do say that the reservoir is supposed to be facing the front of the van, but they also say that the shocks are labeled improperly, i.e. that the shock labeled right hand is supposed to go on the left and vice versa. But I don't know how other shocks are labeled, but mine were labeled correctly for the t1n. And then that gave me, the instructions were conflicting because on the one hand it was saying that the reservoir should be facing the front, but on the other hand it was saying they should be installed opposite where they were labeled. So in the rest of the video, I'm going to show some tips about how to actually install them and why they can't be installed the other way around. So other than the challenge of figuring out which shock should be installed on which side, I ran into the other challenge that the eye-to-eye length of the new shock wasn't the exact same of my existing shocks, even after I had jacked up the van and there was no sag, like the rear axle was in the air. And when I say it wasn't exact, it was too long. And then it's obviously totally impossible to compress the shock while you're under the van. So the way I got around this was I compressed the shock and did this little slip knot compression thing to compress the shock and hold it compressed while I installed the upper. So what you see here is, so I installed the upper bolt, and obviously this is the first time I was installing it, and that was in the opposite direction. It was in the wrong direction because it looks as if it should be installed this way, but the way I actually installed, this is the only time I got a video, because the second time when I swapped the shocks, it was just like very quick and easy. Here you can see how I have the shock compressed, and then I slowly let out the tension in the string to let the eye-to-eye expand until I can pop in the lower bolt. And then you'll see, this actually took me 2 tries. The first try it slipped out, but this time I got it done. And then once the second bolt is in, you can tighten everything down and it's fine. It's easy from here. And then what you see here is I just wanted to show why you can't install the shocks in the other direction on the 140 wheelbase because of this floor crossmember, and the clearance between the crossmember and the shock is too close. On the 150 wheelbase, the crossmember isn't there, the 158, so it can in theory be installed this way, but for the 140, it can't be because there just isn't enough room.